which means there are 400 conversations and each of them are a minimum of 1 hour. So you can
Wow.
imagine how many hours of conversations we have out there. And that's what I was telling you. Let's put it live, because every little
Yep.
thing that you say, someone somewhere, you'll be surprised, someone somewhere in some part of the world gets inspired by you. So that's why I put it out.
Awesome. Awesome. And I truly appreciate that. And I feel that warmth, right? So I'll introduce myself first again. So my name's Jim Doxdator. I'm Wolf Clan, Cayuga Nation, Haudenosaunee from Six Nations. I live in Canada, and I'm a mediator. I do family mediation, child protection mediation. I do restorative practices. I'm also a farmer and a Reiki practitioner. So I combine all those skills into putting my best intentions into the work that we're doing with people. So today we're talking about the effects of colonization, and Vikram and I were just talking about, he had lots of great videos online that they really spell a story similar to mine, but yet those people and I have never met. So this consistency of a story that goes on, and the deep effects it's had on people's lives. So I'll start by saying, my family were Haudenosaunee, and we have had family put in residential school, going back 5 generations, me being the 5th. I'm the only person in that 5 generations not to be in residential school. It closed in 1970. I was born in 1971. And that very well might have been the difference. Outside the closing of the school, the effects of the people that went there, and I had parents that went there, aunts and uncles that went there, grandparents that went there, and they treated them all different all the way through, in the sense where some, they grabbed them at birth and kept them for a couple of years. They didn't hold them, they didn't comfort them, they just give them back, this crying baby. Some they kept for 12, 13 years of their life. Some just short periods of time, right? And I look back on them, I wondered why. And it was really caused confusion back home, because you had some folks that were ready to fight. You had some folks that were ready to hide, right? You had some folks that would freeze. And it was a really a colossal of reactions all the time. And as a kid, you're watching this and you don't know why people are acting this one way. Jump ahead later on in life. For myself, I went through some troubles in my life, a divorce, and you go seek out help. And I got some help, and I got an understanding of what was going on, and they helped me. And what they had me understand was that I suffered from a complex form of PTSD, right? And this is going back 15 years ago now. The complex form of PTSD, meaning that a trauma happened, right? Nobody said anything. Another trauma happened. No one said anything. And it just kept on happening and happening and happening. Well, you grow up in your physical form, but your emotional self stays back there. And that kept on happening. And as a mediator, we recognize sometimes with adults, sometimes they'll act like 5-year-old children. Sometimes they'll act like 10-year-old, 15-year-old young adults. And that's where the trauma happened. I can hear it when they speak. The emotional place they were in when the trauma happened is usually where they'll stay, right? So for me, getting that diagnosis was a big deal. It changed my life in a lot of ways. Before, I was working in a very much a power and control industry, and where I worked in engineering and attached to politics. I was an advisor to the Assembly of First Nations, or the Chiefs of Ontario, to the Assembly of First Nations. And that worked out well right up until it didn't. And when you don't have control of your emotional self, you'll find your life will fall apart. And much it did for me. And from there, I was forced to face that past. And in our traditional way, being Haudenosaunee, we look at trauma as, we'll say, opportunity, because it's opportunity to look back in time, make a new decision about what has happened so you can see it clearly. And the big component of it is to rescue that little boy or little girl from that trauma and bring them with you, making a promise that you'll never leave them again, right? So I went through that trauma regression for my trauma. And there's extra to it too. It isn't just, taking away the traumas from this lifetime. What they did was took me back 7 generations back, 7 generations. So I could see, smell, hear, touch, listen to, feel my ancestors. And when they tell me what my original instruction was supposed to be, what am I supposed to be doing here on Earth, right? And we look at something in when trauma happens, the mind splits, right? And we go towards that easiest path, and that's control, right? So I was forced to look at giving up all my control for an unknown. The unknown being I was going to be a peacemaker and a farmer. That's what my ancestors told me. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know all that meant, but I knew I couldn't go back. So I set it all down and I set forth to become a mediator. I was able to take courses. I was able to different modalities and restorative practices. Also, in there, I really had to look at my own triggers when it related to other people, i.e., our clients. So it was a lot of work in order to get from that stage where you were in trauma over to this stage when you're conscious, right? You're of your good mind. And that's the place where, as a tradition, as Haudenosaunee, we say to get to a place where your good mind can be. And your good mind is free of anger, free of any kind of negativity, fear, anything. And you find that when you're not reacting to your fears, you're not reacting to your anger or any negative things, you're simply just there. You're just there in the moment, and you can be how you need to be. So when I look at that work that it took to get out of that hole, right? I am one person out of my whole entire family that has done that work. And there's hundreds of us, right? Hundreds of us that have been affected by colonization. And a lot of folks and my cousins, aunts, and uncles are still stuck back in those places. They're still stuck back in that place of blaming, shaming, and fear, right? Criticism of say what I'm doing here. And I get that. And I don't take it to heart because I was once upon a time sitting in that exact same chair. So I understand why they sit there. I only hold it up and I speak out loud for my cousins, for the younger ones, for the ones that are thinking about making a change, but can't. And they only need to look at our kin to recognize the damage that has come from colonization. Unreal damage. And in the sense where they damage these kids so badly and knowingly let them out into the community without any warnings, any talk of anything, right? And those things sit with us today, right? Now, my mother was in a place called the Mush Hole, they called it. It was in Brantford, Ontario, Canada. And that was that mush hole was right outside of our reserve, and that's where we went. They took us as children to that place, and she had a couple stories for me. And one was that she had actually met the Queen once upon a time, right? Queen Elizabeth, twice. She said, her and Philip, she said, came to the residential school, and they had all the kids lined up with white gloves and nice dresses on. And essentially what she described was that Prince Philip and Queen Elizabeth took 2 children, right? They picked out 2 children, they took them. And I like it the way the story goes. It's almost like, you and I would know each other by now, Vikram. We went to school together. I know Vikram, you know Jim. You would certainly notice if Jim went missing, right? I would certainly notice if Vikram went missing. And I'd be like, hey, where's my guy Vikram? Oh, he's just gone. No, he's not gone. Where is he gone, right? And those stories really stick with me, and I weigh those up against the public image of what people see and talk about, and we know what we know about people, and if you know that about people, you think that way, right? And how couldn't you? If you knew that I had taken children and that was unaccounted for, it'd be a lot different conversation we'd be having right this minute, right? So when I look at that, those incidents really formed up our family's thoughts of what it meant to honor the crown, right? To look at the crown. Second to that, in our family big history, right? we're proud Haudenosaunee people, but we have Irish blood in our veins. And where'd that come from? And this is the colonization story, right? That there was once upon a time a lady named Mary Doherty. So Mary Doherty she was in Ireland at the time. I can't say she lived in Cork, but she came from Cork. They put her on a boat in Cork, Ireland, and they floated her across to Halifax, to the harbor. From there, they got them off and they put them onto trains, and they stopped at every major port along the way. Ottawa, Kingston, all the way down, right? And on those ports, you could go up and you could purchase yourself a child, right? So these were immigrant children that had come in from around the world, wherever they're coming, these specific for Ireland. And you as an adult and your wife could go and say, I need help on my farm, and I'll take that one right there. And that might have been you and me, right? So she had gone through all those ports and no one had picked her. And I joke and I laugh because she was about 12 years old. And I imagined, just because I know my own family, she was probably a sassy ginger kid that just spoke too much and nobody wanted her. And that's fine. But the end result of that was she ended up in the mush hole beside my great-great-grandfather, right? And they had formed up a relationship and made a decision about the age of 14 that they were going to run away back to the reserve and hide, right? And they did. They ran away, and at a point in time when you ran away from residential school, a warrant got put out for your arrest, so you become criminalized, right? Mary Doherty and Andy Johnson lived back on that reserve for the rest of their days, right? They didn't leave the reserve. Mary Doherty was an undocumented citizen, right? And essentially, she learned all 6 of our languages. She integrated into the community. And she is buried down at the Lower Kega Longhouse as a Haudenosaunee person, right? She lived and lived her days as us. That is a real colonization story. That lady wasn't born here. She wasn't. How'd she get here? What's the story behind that? When you get into the details of it, it just makes you know that you have to do that work, because otherwise you can't just keep going down that path of they'll march you way off a cliff. That's the way I look at it. So that's that's my colonization story when I look at how I got here and what shapes up my opinions, what shapes up my view. I didn't cry for the Queen when she died. I didn't bow my head. I didn't take a knee. We don't do that. I wished her a very safe journey, and the rest is up to her, really. The rest is up to her. Just like it's up to you and I at the very end. It's no one, it's going to be you. So.
Absolutely. I mean, this is like just the fact that, I mean, look, we can't even relate to what you've gone through, and of course people before that, but we were just discussing about this hurricane in Florida. Just the fact that just to think that you're going to go through something which we can't even imagine happens to someone. I mean, I'm not even comparing the two. I'm just saying that for me to even understand that, like I was just saying, I had to watch some live telecast to understand what are they telling people to do, just to think what's happening in someone's mind. So you've gone through something so serious in that family. I mean, we can't imagine. I mean, really, and this is all happening in this world and carried on for a long time.
That's right. That's right. And then it funnels through to child protection, right? So I work as a child protection mediator. So I see the residuals of society's ills, I guess, right? People are out there doing what they're doing, and they fall to the side, and child protection collects them and says, okay, we need to talk to you, right? And when I deal with a lot of my own folks, Indigenous folks, every single time when we tell a story, we always get down to where that colonization started, and the problems it caused in people's lives, right? It caused tremendous problems. It caused issues around even identity, right? It caused issues around your worth. Supremacy was at play for a long time, telling you you're not as good. You're not as good. If you're not of a good mind, you'll start to believe that and act into it, right? And that's where I see a lot of our folks are in that mode. It's almost like what do they call it? A Stockholm Syndrome, right? That you're afraid to speak out against the regime. You're afraid to, say the counterpoint to it. And I don't blame them. I know the fear they're going through. I don't criticize it like that. It's not a like, I can't believe they don't do it. I just understand why they can't and the fear that takes over because of it. We're talking about 150 years of oppression here, maybe even a little longer when you look at it. That has a tremendous effect on an individual for them to look at themselves in that moment and wonder, what good will I even get if I do something? Is it even any point? And that's the lost feeling people will have, right? But after healing and really after you go through your trauma regression, once that light of yours starts to burn bright, I'm telling you, the world looks totally different from this point of view than it did over there, right? I'm not hiding from the world anymore. I'm showing myself to the world, right? That's really the difference. And your voice, you didn't have a voice before. Now you have a voice, right? You have a strong voice. You can say what you need to say, and that is the goal, right? That is good-mindedness from our point of view. And one of the major things that we're asked to do as Haudenosaunee is to pick others up when they've fallen down, right? And that will essentially be my work until the day I die. Is helping others to pick them up without judgment. Meeting people right where they're at. Because I was falling on the ground once upon a time. I was down there, and somebody picked me up and dusted me off and told me I was worthy of all this, right? So, and the only thing they said I owed was to pay that back. That was it. There's no money. There's no gifts. Nothing. It's just you just keep paying it and paying it and paying it. Because we have a lot of brothers and sisters out there that are suffering, right? And they don't know why they're suffering. And our job is to help understand that. That's really, I see that as my task, what I'm supposed to be doing here.
Yeah, just the fact that you came out of it is like a stone on you and it's been moved, and now you understand what it feels like when the stone is moved. So now you can at least, now you're looking at it from, again, the same thing. Now you can relate to it and you can understand what other people are going through who have that stone on them. I think that's something which, but when did Mary Doty come into Canada?
Pardon me?
Mary Doty, when she come to Canada? What year?
Mary Doherty would have come into Canada around the turn of the century, around 1900s, maybe 1910, around there. I'm working on getting the records to figure out exactly where, but just, I know how old my great grandpa was. I know, around, he was around 14, around, 1910. And that was him, right? So around 1910, around that neck of the woods they were at. And I mean, I don't know what the world looked like at that point in time and how scary it was, but it must have been insane the for her to open her eyes and see what she saw. She must have, holy man, what's going on here in the world?
No, but because yesterday, interestingly, we had someone from Ireland. Andrea was talking about her basic whole presentation and everything was on intergenerational trauma, because Ireland also went through serious thing. I mean, the whole concept of what, like she was saying, in the 1850s, the people call it the famine, but actually some people call it a genocide.
Yep.
So that part of it, how it moved, and then it going down to Irishmen joining the British in World War II. So in a way, they were shamed. Those people were shamed because they joined the British, and it's all connected to that. I mean, because the British did that to them. Just the fact that, look, I mean, the fact that you hear that here people are starving and food is being exported out of your country, just those kind of things. First, the fact about, of course, what those people went through and what people can do to people. I mean, do you lose faith in people? I mean, that's something.
It's insane.
Yeah.
And you say that because in my mind, I would never have thought to do that to anyone. I'd never think to do that to you. If you wouldn't do what I wanted you to do, I'd be like, all right, Vikram, well, we'll try again tomorrow or another time. I give up, but be settled that that's your position, and I don't want to intrude on it, and we'll come back and try again tomorrow. And I'll say maybe there's another way forward. Let's sleep on it. I certainly wouldn't come and upset your apple cart and poke you in the eye. And that's really what I look at how that happened to us. At a point in time, we were all inclusive, self-sufficient, right? There's a story about our food sources and going back to Washington, General Washington, the raids back in the middle 1800s. And essentially what he did was he recognized our power, right? Like, how come these folks aren't devastated? How come they're not falling down? Like, we fight wars with them, nothing happens. They realized our source was our food. So they made raids and they came in and they burnt 1 million bushels of corn, beans, and squash, right? We had that en masse. If you're my neighbor, bud, you can come over anytime and I'll help you out. And there's no food scarcity. We always have food, right? But when they burnt that food, that did something tremendous to us, right? In the sense where that fear came upon us. And the chiefs at the time, there's 50 chiefs in our Haudenosaunee Confederacy. They give instructions. And what they did was they give everybody bundles of either seeds, stuff for ceremony, like, all their stuff for ceremony, with the instruction to go run and hide, right? Run and hide until it's safe for us, right? And because if they got their hands on some of the things that we had, right? And they didn't mean anything to them, but they knew it meant a lot to us, right? This spelt the end of us, right? This is what spelt the end of us right here. And years after, we all, we congregate and we meet again. And the chiefs themselves made a decision. And they said that they will not let anybody know when all 50 chiefs are present at a meeting. And the only way we will know is if they sing this fifth song, and they sing it to its entirety, right? They could sing it halfway, right? There's the last verse they sing, and we know it, right? And when I've only heard it once or twice, pardon me, that last verse, and I knew all 50 chiefs were in the room, right? It was a real honored day for me to be there, right? But I've also been there when they cut that song short, right? And then that means that only we know that we're all not there. And the fear was that if the colonizers knew we were all there, they would come blow it up or burn it down or shoot us all, something. So those fears live to this day. And even so, seeds, right? My grandmother, when she passed, suitcase under the bed, and two things came out of there: a big jar of old seeds, right? Old as time, and an eagle feather. And those two things are what I collected out. That was goes back into my bundle, right? So my bundle now has these old seeds that were given the instructions to hide until it's safe. And now what we're saying as Haudenosaunee is it is safe to come out now, right? It is safe to be a Haudenosaunee, right? We are a good-minded spot, and there's others in a good mind. So with that, we can protect each other from the ills of what's going to come get you or the dangers of the world, right? So we really do lean on that good mind, and we lean on those seeds. Those seeds are our life, right? They have stories as old as time embedded in them, and our need to be a part of that is great. We want to be a part of that all the way through time.
Yeah, I think that cultural identity part that you were talking about, I think to be able to retain that, to maintain it, and be proud of it. I mean, those are things which maybe takes time. I'm sure you were talking about it, but I don't know how many people have reached that stage that you have reached to be able to look at everything from that perspective. I think that's important. But how do you yeah.
Go ahead. Well, I was going to say, reaching that stage is, you have guides, right? You have elders that are giving you instruction along the way, where to put your mind, how to rest your mind. And like, these are old lessons that, rejuvenated are very much relevant today, right? We had to calm ourselves 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 3,000, 5,000, 10,000 years ago. Well, we still know how to calm ourselves to this day, right? And that bigger picture is the big picture you get when you're, I'll say, you're woken up, right? You're woken up from that sleep, and that's what trauma is. We go into a sleep, and we think we're protected there, right? For most things, but you're not. We're so much at danger when we're walking around blind or deaf, or we can't speak. So yeah, this looking at it and realizing the big picture is part of the trauma regression. Someone says, look at where you are, right? And you got to take a good hard look around, and you're like, wow, I see. I thanks for telling me that, right? So
yeah, but how I'm looking at it is like you're in a cave and you're peeping out. Some people are peeping out, but you've
yeah,
been able to walk out of it. I mean, it takes a lot of courage, maybe, because you don't know what is you've been, because you've been told so much, and that fear part of it that you were saying. I think those are things which is to be able to get out of it. Only then you realize, and to tell someone, it's not so easy. They have to experience it. I mean, to be able to get out there.
it really is an experience situation, and it's the experience that you carry. I think about those moments in time when I regressed that trauma. That was 15 years ago. I remember it today like it's fresh, right? It's just, it will not leave my mind. I don't want it to leave my mind. I have a special place for it in my mind that I keep there, and it is a very special moment in time. I still remember the elder wiping my tears, telling me it's all going to be okay, right? It's those little things that give you the kindness on the other side of things to realize at a point in time in your life, we ask for courage, we ask for strength, all these things. And when we ask for those things, I look at it like our creator says, you say, I want to be stronger. And so the creator puts a great big mountain in front of you, right? Like, oh, you got to climb that mountain to get you stronger. You're like, oh, okay, I just need more strength, creator. Puts another mountain in front of you. You're like, all right, listen, bud, this is getting a bit much, right? And you might say, what do you really need, right? And you say, I really need pity, right? And that was one thing in the culture that I learned that it was okay to do, was is ultimately when you're at your lowest and you need help, you can ask for pity, right? We have a very, very kind, understanding creator, Songundiso, we call him, that knows what's happened to you and will show you that kindness. But it's you that has to open the door in order for that kindness to flow, right? You don't realize you have the door closed and you're sitting there hitting yourself over the head with a hammer. That's what it looks like, right? But we open the door and allow others to show you that kindness. And after my trauma regression, when I did it, I went back into my room, I remember, and I cried for 2 whole days, right? There at the Healing Lodge. And they came, they didn't, not that they didn't do anything special, but they let me be, right? They came up and they would talk to me from time to time. They'd dry my tears if they're talking to me. They'd ask me if I want something to eat, something to drink, but that was my time that I had to spend, because in 36, 37 years, I had never cried, right? Ever. And I had lost siblings and grandparents and close friends, always bottling it up, not realizing what damage all that was doing to me, right? And those are special times I look back at, very, again, they're embedded in my mind. And whenever I can offer that same kind of thought or feeling to somebody else, is quick. I can grab that quick and go to that place because I know the importance of it, right?
But I think the important thing is the spirituality aspect of it. I think that is something that really, as it seems also in the kind of environment you were, I think that's what comes into play and helps a lot, I think.
Very much, and protecting your spirit, right? Honoring your spirit, right? It's an entity of one self that you could go a long time and never pay attention to, right? But then that spirit will get testy, and it'll get, it doesn't like how you're treating it. And inside, that's the internal struggle will go on, right? And until we accept and this is who I am and what I do and how I'm going to do it, that unsettledness is going to feel, right? That feeling of that uneasiness inside is going to try to fight to get out, and overpower you, right? It isn't until you really realize you really have to give up. Give up. You're hanging on to it so tight, and someone says, "What do I do? What do I do?" And like, let go. Just let go. That's what you do, right? Let it be. So.
Yeah. But Jim, how do you handle the hate aspect of it? I mean, obviously there is somewhere down there that part of it. How do you handle that?
I do get a lot of hate, and something happens where, if you and I are rolling around in the mud, say, right, and we know we're not supposed to be down there in the mud, and you didn't notice me getting up, and I went up and I went in the house and I got all cleaned up. I'm standing on the porch, I'm all cleaned up, my good clothes now, right? And our mom or her aunt comes out, we're cousins or something, and she says, "Vikram, what are you doing? Why are you down that mud? Why can't you be more like Jim?" Right? You get me? And in that moment in time, you and I will feel that tension between us, right? Because you're like, he was in the mud too just a second ago, that little cheat, right? And type of thing. But I escaped, right? I escaped, and I got to a better place. Now, in that, would I stand there and gloat? No. I put my hand up to your mom or my mom, say, "Listen, just give this a second. I can help him. I know the way out," right? Now, you could accept that. You could say, "Thanks, Jim. I appreciate all this, and no problem, anytime. I know you do it for me." And that'll be our relationship. But if you are suffering from trauma, right, there's a jealousy point that happens in that moment in time when I leave, right? That you're, I'll say for us, they got born back in residential school, right? They got born. The stories that you hear of people that turned each other on each other, right? Type of thing. They turned their brothers against each other. They turned sisters on each other. And they did it through jealousy, right? They did it through envy. Oh, look what they have. Or good job you, Jim. Good. And you're over there going, "I did a good job too." And they would do that on purpose. So, right? Like if only you and I could, in that, drag aside and go, "Look at, they're trying to divide us, bud." And go, "Yeah, I know that. We'll just play along. We won't do it." Let's go, "Oh my God." That's what we'll do. We couldn't organize like that. We couldn't organize like that. So what was happening to you, I saw, and I didn't understand. I didn't want it to happen to me. And you were mad because it wasn't happening to me. And that was our relationship, right? So now that I'm standing up on the porch, all cleaned up, ready to go, you don't care my instructions on how to get up there and how to do that, right? You don't care because you're so mad at me from way back. You're going, and this is just one more thing. Now, to that person standing on the porch cleaned up, I say to them, "Look at you, the person, have to find kinder words. You have to maneuver to attract them," right? And someone says, "Well, why do I have to do the work? I already got myself out of the mud. I got myself cleaned up," right? No one left behind, right? No one left behind. We can't leave people behind like that. It's great that you figured it out. Now turn and tell the others, right? And this is the other thing. Will they do it right away? Run to you? Maybe not, right? Don't worry about it, okay? If today they didn't do it, you come back tomorrow and say, "Hey, come on, let's go do this." If you don't do it that day, you come back the next day, right? You're the resilience in this, right? And I look at my position out of a lot of kin. I know I am the only one that has figured out that this is what's wrong and this is what to do, right? And it wasn't just a process of mine. These are processes out there for a lot of people, and a lot of people I've met taken them. But also, I know the fear in getting into those, right? When I was in my trauma regression program way back in the day, there was a fella that was right on the cusp of doing that work, and on the moment, he just broke and he left, right? I felt bad for him, right? In the way where you're almost so close to the drink of water, you just have to take the drink because all you have to do, and you'd rather go dry and run. But that to me was how powerful that trauma from the past was represented, right? Even on the cusp of getting your drink of water, You'd rather go dry. And that's powerful. That's a lot of shame, right? So when I get hate coming at me or criticism, I take it I take it with a grain, I'll say, just a little bit. It boils down by the time it gets to me, because I'm looking at the hurt that's coming from. I understand why they want to hurt me through it. All I can do is just be there with them. That's it, right? I can point and to where the direction is, to where to go to, who to talk to. That's all the power I have, right? That's it. And I respect that. And that's all the power I want, right? Somebody says, what do I supposed to do, Jim? I have power to direct you to say, you could go do this and this will help. But it stops there, right? It stops there. And so therefore you don't take it too much to heart about the hate, right? Because there is hate. There's hate where you're sitting. There's hate where I'm sitting. There's hate all over the place. And it's up to us. If we respond to it, we become part of it, right? If we stay strong and we keep doing what we're going to do, we have a chance to defeat it. That's the best we can do, right? It's when we lean over and we get part of it is when it all broke at that point in time. Because we can't. People's thoughts are their thoughts. Their feelings are so strong towards it, and if they expressed it in that moment, I say to people, respect that moment. Look at you and I have both been mad at a moment and yelled in a moment, right? You got kicked in the shin, you got something happening. What's going on here? You yelled, right? I wouldn't lean to you and go, Vikram, no yelling. And you might go, I just got kicked in the shin, right? I'm like, no yelling though. Like, it doesn't, you're allowed to express. And I appreciate you expressing. We've lost those moments in time where we talk to each other like that, right? Where we understand why you did it, and is there anything you need or I can do, type of thing. We engage right in the argument. We go, why are you talking like that, Vikram? Why are you doing this? Why? And now you're mad about getting kicked in the shin, and you're mad at me yelling at you too, right? And it caused two problems now. There was one, now there's two. And we have to start looking at conflict like that, and those that are in a bad way in that same way of, don't engage with them in that argument, but you engage with them in dialogue. And if they want to talk, that's fine. It'll take time to talk. You leave that door open, and one day they can come and talk to you.
But I was, from what you were saying, was interesting about these children, that divide that between them and playing one against the other kind of thing. The basic concept of divide and rule that you obviously always hear about colonization, starting that young and happening there. I think that was interesting. That was, yeah.
These are children, right? They're 2, 3, 4 years old, right up to teenagers. They said that, my uncles, they left when they were 14, right? And for the 14 years they're in there, they taught them how to fight each other, right? It was like saying, Vikram and Jim are going to fight, and whoever gets it gets the apple today, right? We didn't have a choice to fight, and we had to fight, right? And I'm looking at you, I'm thinking, this is my friend. I don't want to fight him. And you're looking at me as my friend. But then you're looking at the headmaster, and you're looking at everybody else, thinking, if I don't fight, it'll be worse for me on the other side. In those moments in time, when you think about that isolation and that pressure, that's enough to turn a fella right there, right? Yeah. That's enough to turn a fella. You would turn, because you're stuck. You're literally stuck, and the only thing you have is your aggression, and that's the only thing. And those lessons have stuck with us as individuals, as a community, as families, for 150 years. That's stuck with us, right? This is the unlearning that we really have to engage in. And then, that what I'm saying, that oppression going, that plays out everywhere, right? It plays out in our administrations, right? It plays out in our politics. It plays out in our policing. It plays out in our school systems. It plays out everywhere. And why I say it plays out, because at the end of all of those exercises, they allow punitive, right? And they call for punitive often. So if you go against the council, it's going to be punitive. If you go against the police, it's going to be punitive, right? Well, that is just recreated residential school in a community setting. So really that's gone on. And I'm opposed to it, just for the record. I speak out against it, and that is unpopular, right? It's unpopular to people even when they hear it, because they think they're going to get in trouble even for hearing it, right? And I get what they're saying, but at the end of the day, it needs to be said, because we can't live like that. We can't keep living in that way. Something deep inside me won't allow it.
Exactly. I mean, that's the whole thing, that we have to be able to understand that the roots of it have been created. They're so strong that that mind has been programmed to believe that that is the system. I keep
That's
asking
right.
people that, just, okay, those are structures which were created and they were done for a certain purpose. Just leave that alone. Think now of a fresh, with a fresh mind, blank canvas. How would you want to create structures? They can't. It always goes down to that aspect. Like I keep saying, people think of tinkering with the existing structures and institutions. It's not going to work, because the foundation there is totally different. So I don't know, how
Yeah,
what you think
and
of that?
well, I'm a big fan of what's called restorative communities, right? So restorative practices, restorative justice. I am a big fan of that. Our communities would have been totally restorative. Think of this system here, right? So if you come and visit, right? I know you, we know each other, but you can't just come walk down into the village. You just can't do that, right? There's a protocol. And you built a fire up the edge of the woods, and I saw it. And my grandmother said, "Oh, someone's up there," and I went around. Oh, I say Scano Vikram, right? That's what I say. Scano gay, right? Vikram. And what that said is, all I asked you was, how is your good mind? Right? That's it. That's all I asked you, right? I either want to know, you say, Scano gay when his shriho, you say. I am good. My good mind is good on this good day, right? I'm like, yeah, rock on. What do you need, bud? Right? Corn, beans, and squash, we got a ton of it for you. That's the protocol. And when you're down in the village, down there doing your business, talking to people, you're my responsibility, right? That I brought you there. I said he is of good mind, right? And he's going to be down in our village doing his doing. I'm responsible for that, right? And if something messes up, it isn't just you they're going to deal with. They're going to come talk to me, because they're going to say, Jim, has your ability to see a good mind wavered, right? What's happening? We're more concerned about that aspect. We'll deal with him, right? Essentially send you away. But we want to know, right? That's real, right? That was the way. And not just that, inside of the village, marriage was a funny thing, where when I married, say, I would go live in my mother-in-law's longhouse, right? So it was a matrilineal society. So the women would run that longhouse, right? And so whoever their daughters would marry would live there with them, and they would become part of their family, right? If we weren't ready to get married, right? And I'm over at the longhouse of my spouse there, and we're married, and I'm getting jealous or angry, whatever it is. Her mother will bring me back to my longhouse and tell my mother that she's not done growing me up yet. He's not done growing. He's not done yet. You gotta send him back when he's done. We kept track of each other like that, right? We showed each other the example going forward. And it was just really to be in a good mind, right? And when we saw that, it set off alarm flags. It set off bells, because we're like, why are they acting this way? Why are they doing this, right? So in that way of I'm saying is our systems we have, and calling people into a good mind, that has gone on for a long time, even up to the place about the 1900s around there, where the government people, the crown, that's who was right, wasn't they would come and meet with us. All we ask that they send people with a good mind, right? Now you think about that for a minute. Imagine I said to you, Vikram, you come from India, where you are, and come all the way to Canada. But I said to you, listen, just bring people with a good mind, right? You know what I mean? You got that in your mind, right? Look at it, and you got 5 people to choose from, right? And you might have your asshole cousin Andy down there too. I'm just saying, we all have that guy. And you're like looking who to decide. You're like, nah, Andy, you can't come, right? You can't come because I made a promise, right? And he might go, oh, he won't know. They'll know you can't come, right? So it means that when we show up and sit down at the table and we look at each other eye to eye, we will see and hear that good mind speaking, right? We have, they would have a conference before, they say, where we would meet and we would just talk, right? And sometimes what they would talk about, they would bring a basket of their best goods, right? And I would bring a basket of my best goods too. We'd set it down in front of each other. And I pull out your stuff and I look at it and we talk about it, right? I see your corn really grew well. How did that go for you, Vikram? What did you do, right? And you tell me the story. I see this didn't work out well. What happened, right? And I'd share with you, here's what you should do and here's what you can do, right? That would bring us closer together right there, right? I would see, because that basket is representative of what you've been up to the last year, right? And this back is through mine. And we would be there in those moments. Then we would switch over and do business, right? Once we realized we're in that good-minded spot. And the government stopped sending good-minded people. We stopped letting them in. Eventually they came and they took over our traditional council. Like our CNP came in with gunpoint, took out all the Confederacy chiefs, and they installed an elected system. So imagine 50 people showing up, assigning people to seats, having a vote, and then taking over a government all in one day, right? Happened all in one day in 1924. And that pain has lived in my community since that day, right? Grandfathers have told their sons that story, dads have told their sons that story, and so forth. We all know the story. And we're upset about it, right? We're upset that our traditional government was removed for the fact that the crown had a hard time talking to them, right? And it wasn't our guy's fault. It was the crown's fault, in the sense where they could not send good-minded people anymore. They couldn't.
I think this good mind, this good mind thing is quite interesting, because I keep saying that, look, I'm very selective of the people I bring into the Zoom sessions, because the whole concept being, let's get people with the good mind. I'm just taking now this term, I'm going to use it somewhere or the other. People with the good mind, because when they get together, things are very different. So I think you've given me, in a way, support of the concept that I have, because it's really important, because when we're putting all this out, people are listening to it, we need that people with the good mind to be talking about it, because definitely that is what is required. That's exactly what I keep saying about identifying those with the mediator mindset. I think the concept being identifying those with a good mind. I think now
that's it.
In a way, I might actually use this.
I welcome you too. You know what, you can adopt it, and it's a way of being, right? Anytime you get mad, just question, why am I mad? Why am I feeling this way, right? What's going on for me? And be honest with yourself. And I'm telling you, once you start working out all that anger or any kind of aggression, just to be is the greatest moment in time on the face of the earth. It really is. You feel privileged for being here, and just in the oddest moments of time, like here, I'm privileged for being here with you and being able to tell these stories. It is really, it means a lot to me, and I really appreciate it. I want to tell you that I appreciate you. I appreciate the work you're doing. So.
That's really nice, Jim. Just hearing that sounds so nice. I mean, of course, for me, it's a privilege that you are here, but just for the fact that you're saying this, I mean, it's really nice. And I think, but I think this aspect of getting the right people together, I think that's what will make a difference. I mean, we'll get there. I mean, of course, there'll be work to do, but just the fact that having good conversations, I think that by itself, which goes back to what I started with, that just that one sentence you might say can inspire someone, can connect with someone, touch someone. So let's put it out there, because we could have had the same conversation with it not going out, but it's available now for life with someone will watch it, which is what I'm trying to do. Let's just put it all out there. The good people.
And the message out to people is that, when we might think this is it, or this is the spot you're going to be in, change can happen at any time, right? Once you get a momentum going and be able to see everything that's going on, that's where change is going to happen, right? Because you'll be able to take that risk that you didn't want to take, but it'll be a little more calculated this time. And it is step by step by step. Now, I describe my healing journey out. It was a good 5 years of my life right there, right? 5 years that I had to take out to build. Now, I was down here, say, and now I'll say I'm up here. It is an elevated position that I have created for myself, and it took time. Now, the chances of me falling back are next to zero, right? I have safeguards in my life to allow me to go through thought processes without acting, right? To consult without saying it. And that, a strategy, when you think about how are you going to maneuver through life, you didn't have a strategy before, you just reacted, right? Now I have people I can talk to. I have, myself I can talk to. I'm connected to me now, right? And that's all I need. That's all I need in my life. I'm fulfilled in my life where I have the appropriate people helping me at the appropriate times, and more importantly, I have me who is in charge of me 100% of the time, right? And I'm only responsible. And that now is certain as dried in cement, that idea. And I live there. And I won't be knocked off that platform. I won't. So
No, I
I
think
welcome any. It's big
how
enough for anyone to welcome. Go ahead.
exactly,
Sorry.
because I'm just looking at it that you've created this good mind, or you've got into this good mind, and you are connected to it all the time, and it's your sounding board, it's your whatever, it's your guide, it's everything. So
Yeah.
I think to reach that point, and then that being, first of all, being comfortable with it, and to be able to accept it as yourself, being yourself, and not questioning it. You know that you reach that point, that this is, you are where you can look at yourself, and then, like you said, you want to reach out to other people, but they'll get there, there'll be their journey, how that happens, when that happens. But the fact is, at least you are at a point when you feel, yes, now connecting to
That's
that
it.
aspect of yourself, and the right part of yourself, the good part of yourself. But
Yeah.
my that show of mine, I think I'm still going to keep that in conversation with the beautiful mind. That was the whole idea behind that show. Let's just have these
Yeah.
conversations.
That was the idea. I remember watching that show a long time ago, and it drew a tear to my eye, right? Um, Realizing that he's living this hell inside of his mind, and I lived that hell inside my mind, and you thought you were sentenced to that place, right? But you see where your mind is so powerful. It's so powerful. It can just take large amounts of things and say, no, we're gonna get rid of you. You're all out of here now, and carry on forward. We have that ability. We have that ability. We're super beings. I look at that. I don't think people realize just how powerful we are, right? As individuals, we tremendous power. So through these talks, it unleashes somebody out there is listening that might be trapped to know that there is a way out, right? And it is one step at a time, right?
So, Jim, you also have to watch my show. I have a show called In Conversation with the Beautiful Mind. There are
Okay.
40 plus episodes on that.
Oh wow.
So the whole idea was to just have these conversations with people like you now saying the good mind. I was
Yeah.
calling it the beautiful mind, people with the
Okay.
mediator mindset. So there are about 40 plus episodes. There's lots to watch, Jim. There's lots to watch for you.
Well, I'll definitely check that out. I'll definitely
Yeah.
check that out. That's awesome. So
But Jim, what this whole concept of intergenerational trauma, interesting that came up yesterday from Andrea's thing. She was saying, of course, from her side, she's saying the research is still happening, that it actually starts affecting your genes. It becomes a genetic issue, and that I
yeah,
think sounds very serious. That sounds serious.
it's sometimes you look at the trauma as it's acting down on us, right? It can actually change the cells in your body, right? It can change. It can create such a split mind that split mind is thinking in a way that you never even thought of thinking in your mind, right? It's an unleashing of it, right? And I just lost my spot for a second.
Yeah, basically just the fact that
Yeah.
the genetic aspect of it
Oh, yeah,
being
that's right. Yeah.
passed down, and
Yeah.
all that. Those are
Well, it's one thing my Reiki practitioner taught me, right? Is that the trauma actually lives inside of the cells inside of our body, right? And for the amount of force it took for that cell to get that trauma in it, right? The amount of force that's going to take it out of it isn't proportional, right? It is another action that needs to be taken. So force brought it in, but force won't bring it out, right? It's very much a coaxing of it out. So when you think about how trauma sits in every cell in your body, and you think about some folks that have, I see folks with a lot of serious health concerns, right? Is morphed into something else and something else and something else. That is a result of those cells transforming all the way along due to that trauma. And when you see it, you really don't believe it that something could change in that way. But just what you're talking about, what someone talked about yesterday, very much I believe that, if you sat in your trauma, and trauma is like, it calls out for sugar, right? It calls out for salt, it calls out for grease. All those, we call those the five white gifts, right? That were brought to us that caused really serious health concerns, right? When you're not used to a diet of high sugar, high salt, high fat, right? That is comfort to your trauma. And you can fall into it and ease into it and just be into it. And in fact, that way will change you. It'll change you. It'll change the way you think. If you eat, let's put it this way, if you eat a whole bunch of processed food all the time, it will change the way you think, right? It'll change the way you think about things. You could see a really fresh homemade dinner and it would not be as appealing as that fried food, right? And we have to understand that food can change our mind. It can deepen our trauma too. And these is very difficult because we're talking about the things that keep people comfortable, right? This is the comfort that we're talking about being aware of. And that's a hard part for folks right there, giving up their comfort.
yeah. No, I mean, of course, she was talking about how I told her she must participate in the symposium, and she was very reluctant. And then she said, I really thought about it. She took some weeks to think about it. And she said, I mean, just the fact, why was she hesitant? She was looking at that. And then
Yep.
this whole concept in her mind about intergenerational trauma, because like I said, Ireland did go through a lot. I mean, for them, whatever, and their stories there, how you look at people, all that. So she said that was one of the things that she was looking at. But then she understood, and then you have to please watch a session. All the sessions are nice, but this one I'm saying because it's connected to that intergenerational trauma aspect of it. That was, I think, something which I feel that a lot of people don't even consider. I mean, they don't even, because it's all happening and it's all at the back of your mind. It's somewhere there. But I think we need to, I mean, some way look at it. But from the other end, let's look at it the other way. Then they say spirituality can also affect the genes. So you have that being a counterbalancing aspect available to you. So you have that available. How many people can connect to it? How many people have they all? I mean, just that. I mean, it's again the mind thing. I think that what.
Yeah, and I agree. I'm a Reiki practitioner, so I'm well versed in how to help people equalize out their energy, right? And to come into that place of safety, right? Um, Now, with that said, there's a whole other section of the population that I've experienced, I've felt all of it, that simply have closed off that spiritual connection. They've said, nope, that's it. And they associate it with their belief in God or their belief in religion, whatever it is. And it's that, to me, is a danger, right? Because on one end of it, you're saying, you don't believe in this, it doesn't matter what you don't believe in. But you have to believe that you have a spirit, you have some kind of energy, right? And on a really simple front, is that positive energy? Is it negative energy? That is your spirit. That is the spirit part. They're thinking too big that it's like out there somewhere, but it isn't. It's just right here. And it's all you, and only you can say whether or not your spirit, your energy feels good or it doesn't feel good. And if it doesn't feel good, we're sitting here saying that as humans, we deserve and can feel good. You're allowed to, right? That there's a way for you to feel this way and to be in this good spot. There's no reason to sit over there, right? There's no reason to sit over there. And that's the message I would have for folks, is to break away from those mainstream thinking, right? And just be honest with yourself about your own energy. Does it feel positive or negative? Because those are the thoughts that are going to stop you from progressing. Because if I say I just feel like negative energy, and you go, Jim, let's go do some spiritual work, and I'm like, I don't feel like doing that, right? That's, you said to me, hey, come over to where I am. We'll have a week-long spiritual retreat. It'll be awesome, right? This idea. To me, that sounds perfect. I'm like, now I'm on the next plane. I'm gone, right? To somebody else, it sounds like you're saying, come over, I'm going to pull your teeth for you. And the exact same thing you're saying. And I'm over here listening to them going, what do you mean you don't want to go? Like, it'll be awesome, right? It'll be like beyond awesome. But their cells are telling them no, right? That's what their cells are telling them. Every cell in their body has been affected by this negativity, and they have an inability to say yes, right? And this is what we call oppositional defiance, right? Oppositional defiance, in my mind, is just internalized trauma that has resulted in an action. Someone has spoiled you enough where you won't even accept the good anymore, and that's a sad day. That's sad when that happens.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah, I think that's why you have to connect to a much deeper level, and that's why I keep. I of course you heard me earlier also when I said about the heart soul spirituality aspect.
Yep.
First, in relation to the mediator, and then the participants and the process, all that. I think to get to that point, and that's the kind of mediation that I've been talking about. There is the other one, of course, there is a lot which is on the other end, which we're going to talk about. I mean, here we've spoken about the effects and everything, but let's look at it from the mediation perspective. One, of course, what it was, like which we discussed in the last symposium, colonization affecting it, and then as we moved along, or we are moving along, how the decolonization process, on one end we've spoken about people and their thoughts and their feelings in relation to decolonization. So let's all connect all this to mediation now. So please.
Sure. So in mediation, we find people with problems, right? That's why you're here. No one comes and sees us if you're like, how's things going, Vikram? You're like, things are going great, right? Awesome. Getting divorced? Nope. Child protection? No, none of that's going on. I'm just kind of cruising along in life. We would never meet. We would never meet in our world, because the people that come to our world are in trouble in some aspect. There's trouble in their life that needs to get cleared away, get divided up, get talked about. And that's our job, right? And those folks, when we get down to, let's just say an example is, I have me and you, I'm interviewing, I'm meeting between you and I, and, you I thought you did something, or I wanted you to do something and you didn't do it. And it's caused a big problem in my life because I promised other people you would do it. I'm just giving fictitious examples, right? I'm mad at you, right? And you're mad at me now too. We could go in there and look at it in one way and saying, okay, Jim or Vikram, what did he say to you? He said this. Do you want an apology? Yep. Jim, say you're sorry. And we carry on, right? And even you and I would walk away from that looking at each other, and you might say, I'm not quite good with all this, right? That was a little too quick, and to say, yeah, I'm sorry, Vikram, that it didn't feel like anything, right? You need more out of it. And so do they. And what do they need? We need to find out all that happened, right? Not just in the moment, but what brought you up to that place, right? And then we can go right back to the beginning of time if you want. It doesn't matter to me. My grandpa did this, and he told me never to do this. This is why I'm here. Blah blah blah. We want to hear all that story, and vice versa. I want to hear from Vikram his whole story about how this all affected him by what's gone on. inside of those restorative questions, there is the answer about what is wrong with one side or the other, right? There is the answer. And we go over here and we're going to talk to this one person about the trauma they experienced. And, you know, someone put this onto you, you carried this forward till you met Vikram, and now you're saying Vikram's got to do it. And Vikram's going, no, I don't have to do it. You know, that's not my way. And that, you know, this kind of idea that we're helping you really understand, well, how did conflict start? You know, you're walking along and you're walking along. How did all of a sudden did we get in the spot where we're fighting? Like, why? Right? These are deep questions about, you know, why are you so mad at them? What is it that they remind you of? What is it that it reminds you of? That's where we go to, or I go to, a mediation, because I'm going to find the hurt on both sides. And often there's hurt on both sides. We need folks to realize that their hurt is only banging up against each other, and they're responsible for their own hurt to go deal with it. Those are real moments where people really understand that inside of a big conflict, somebody has looked down on it and realized that you're doing this and you're doing this. None's greater, none's equal. They're just what it is. Now we have to come back again. We know you do this. We know you do this. Now we're going to deal it in a different way, right? And I really feel that that is the road for groups to come into a place of a good mind, right? I can go way back to public school, right? So you're just a little boy. I'm a little boy in public school. You're pulling girls' ponytails, you know, you're messing around, taking people's balls, just being a little boy that we are, right? And the teacher comes in and says, hey, who was pulling ponytails in the class? And you and I look at each other and don't say nothing, right? And we think it just ends there, right? But all of a sudden we get in a big circle with everybody. And the girl with the ponytail, we say to her, hey, did you feel community this week? And she says, no, somebody was pulling my ponytail. We say to them, okay, we'll be back next week. And if whoever's pulling your ponytail, they keep on doing it, we want you to tell us who it was, right? We're going to identify them, who it was. You and I will look at each other, right? We won't be pulling no ponytails for the next bit, because that pressure is on there now, right? We know people are going to look in on this, and they have answers for us. And if you won't stop doing it, they're going to drag you and I aside or talk to us and say, tell us what you were thinking. What were you thinking at the time? What have you thought about since? You know, who's all been affected by what's been done? What needs to be done right here, Vikram, right? That is pressure for individuals, because that's an extra layer of care that people aren't used to, right? Asking you how you feel, how you felt since. This is what needs to enter into our worlds of those questions, because it's those questions that are going to either start forming us. We might pull back, but we're still going to know those questions need to be answered, right? And we'll say that's what they call it, cognitive behavioral therapy on a large scale, right? That means we're all in an area, and we all know if trouble comes, we're all due to answer those questions, right? We, as a group, as a collective group, we need that kind of order amongst us, because we're just saying things to each other and we don't care how much it hurts the other person, and that's not good. That's not good.
But I'm also now, I mean, what we are also going to discuss is the actual dispute resolution process.
Yeah.
Because like I said, we did discuss that, but that getting affected, we of course did speak about that, but how is that process going to be able to, right now, I mean, you would tell me about how you're getting back to that, what are the challenges in acceptance of that? Because I'll tell you where I'm coming from, because
Sure.
I've been saying that the whole concept of a certain box of mediation which is being thrown around the world, it is another kind of colonization, that this is what mediation is. What you are doing, you're uncivilized, you don't know. I mean, just the way colonization went, that you
Yeah.
don't know, we will tell you what it is. So that is what is happening in relation to mediation. So I want you to touch
Yeah.
upon that part. That'll be important to understand from your end.
Sure. So the method of mediation I practice is called IDR, Indigenous Dispute Resolution Model, right? And it was created by two of my mentors, Dr. Rick Hill and Dr. Bob Antone Cat. He's passed away now, right? And they created it for child protection and for families involved in the child protection system, criminal system, conflict at schools, the whole deal. What it prescribes is this: is it prescribes us hearing again the whole story, right? Tell us all that's happened, that's gone on, and we're linking that to the ethno stress I talked about. You know, that pressure coming down on all of us since beginning of since the first time we saw settlers, right? Imagine seeing somebody that's not you on your land. There's a stress attached to that, right? Because it's not you, and you don't know who they are and what's going on. That has gone on for 200 years. That ethno stress, if not more, probably since the beginning of the 1400s or 400 years. And looking at that ethno stress, we relate the story today to those things that have gone on in the past. And we're trying to really help link up the person to go look at, if you address these things from your past, we know you will have a different feeling going forward, right? And that is a challenge sometimes, because that is convincing you, that is getting you to go engage in the treatments, right? Engage in traditional treatments, engage in healing modalities, if you will, and then waiting for the change to happen and then starting the mediation. So sometimes these mediations take longer times because I'm working with Vikram and I'm saying, we're going to convince him, and then he's going to go away and do the work, and then I'm going to talk to him again. That might be 2 months, right? But in that 2 months, something's happened where you're not fighting with the other side anymore, right? You're not, the battle isn't raging on. I'm telling the other side that sit tight, we are doing work over here, and I will deliver you a new person that you can talk to, right? And that aspect of it, sometimes the other side says, no way, I don't believe it, right? I still work with this person, right? I still work with them. That's part of the mediation that needs to be worked out. And I tell it to the Child Protection Agency, I'm look at, if I just take out one piece of the puzzle, that fight won't continue anymore, right? I'm taking out the piece of the puzzle, right? And showing you that this person is triggering you, you are jumping every time they come over, and helping you really understand that. Now, when I go to the other side, sometimes they're in real doubt about it. I'll talk all about how that person has agreed and bitten into these ideas, and they have agreed to go get the treatments. That puts pressure on the other side. You get me? Because you've agreed, you're going to do the work, right? And the other side is wanting to fight. They like it better when they throw a rock across, hit you, and you go, rah, 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 right? They love that. They love it. You're disrupting the conflict. Really, you are. You're essentially telling on each other in these very subtle ways to allow the other person to realize that they're being played by the other side, right? And that's what conflict is, right? It is one side wanting to get to the other side, right? And if I can make you jump, if I can make you scream, then I won, right? And I tell people that's a fool's game. It's a fool's game. There's no benefit coming from it. There's no reward. The only thing you get is either satisfaction you triggered somebody, or heartbreak because you've been triggered. Show me where the winner is, right? So that's the divide, conquer, the disruption. That's probably the best way I could describe out the process, right? You need as much energy coming into that as what's there, if not more, right? Just on a really simple physics basis, you need as much energy to move that thing as what it's sitting there, right? So with that said, it's the figuring it out. Why is this going on? In those moments, that's when people really get it, right?
Yeah, but where I'm coming, what I'm trying to get at is, like, you use the terminology Indigenous Dispute Resolution. Now, on the other end, there is the terminology called private mediation. Now, I
Yep.
want to do away with those two aspects because when I
Yep.
say why should we have to use the terminology private mediation? Because mediation is being done in the court system, so we have to use the word private. But it was supposed to be that. That is mediation. So
Yep.
why do we have to use that? Same thing with this thing about indigenous dispute resolution. I'm saying that was dispute resolution. That is the way we are supposed to, because that's a natural concept of it.
You're,
So to be able to reach that point in relation to, I mean, just the fact that we have to even talk about it, there is some link in between which has been created, which is what I'm saying, this box of mediation which has gone around, which for me, of course, there are issues there. Again, that's a, like I said, it's a colonization process. But to be able to say that this, what you are terming as indigenous dispute resolution, is what mediation should be. So I don't know how you look at that.
well, that is, look at, we look at it like this as Haudenosaunee, right? We have the oldest living democracy known to man in Haudenosaunee. The American government borrowed our methodology of governance to create the Constitution, right? They left out women, matriarchal look at the whole thing, and that's their downfall. It really is. But they got that concept from us. The 13 colonies, original colonies in the States, their symbol was 13 arrows bound them together, right? They got that from us, right? They got that from us. So when we look at these democracies, and the democracy, our Haudenosaunee democracy, is very much a mediation. It is talking one group to the next, 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 till we come out to a decision, yes or no, right? We have questions, and we continually work that process. That modern day, what they're calling mediation, private mediation, is a long ways away from this IDR process, in the sense where they don't look to address the healing, right? That's not the priority, right? Whereas it over here in the IDR, the priority is the healing, because we look at that is the start, middle, and end to all the problems. And if we're mediating to fix problems, we'd be amiss if we don't deal with that very big problem in the room, right? And I recognize through a lot of my own colleagues, I've taught this too, that they look at it sometimes as just a little too far almost. That's what they look at it in their life, right? Because they've never gone that far with somebody. They've never sat with anybody and say, Vikram, tell me about that horrible thing that happened in your life, right? That's hard for them to do. And I tell people this, that as an IDR practitioner, right, what's been put onto me is this, that we can only bring people as far as we've come, right? That's as far as we can go. And with that said, someone says, well, how far do we need to go? What's the work we need to do? And I say this, that you, as a practitioner, if you're serious about this, you have to regress all of your trauma, right? You have to make a commitment to a good mind, so is that you can take people all the way there, right? All the way to the top of that mountain, right? You can look at the light with them that far, right? That's how far we have to go, right? And look at, that's the practice when you were a peacemaker, peace builder in our communities. That was your expectation, that you had skin 7 layers thick, right? That you thought with a good mind, right? And that you had to focus on their healing. That was the most important aspect of it. And you could utilize clan mothers, medicine people, whoever is needed to facilitate that healing. Those are the most important things. And that's the difference, I'll say, between our approach and a Western approach, right? The Western approach doesn't ask for healing. It asks for obedience. It asks for falling in the line, if you will, right? All those things are impossible unless you heal, right? Unless you heal from that thing, you're not going to stand in line, and neither am I, if you're not settled.
Absolutely. I think, but what is happening within your community? I mean, is there acceptance for what you're calling indigenous dispute resolution, or are they also looking at the West? Like a lot
Yeah.
of people look at the West.
No, and I come from a community of 6 nations, and we have a community where maybe 18,000 people on reserve, on the list of 31,000 people in total, right? So there's a lot of us in the one community. And it is, I'll say it's not widely accepted. It's not a wide practice, but you're finding this, and I find this, and I've been in this practice for about 7 or 8 years, that people will just fall, they'll end up in this process, right? Because their life or something has gone so terribly wrong, and there is no answers on the Western Front, right? There's no answers for them there, and they don't know what to do. So out of necessity, they'll land here in this IDR process, and somebody is going to help them heal, right? Now, you talked about hate on just a little while ago. There is no greater source of hate than your own family, right? And that's the difficulty in this, because we have to counsel people in that to say, look at, if you go home and say, hey, I'm going to go start regressing my trauma, right? It's like throwing your hat in the room, see if they shoot it first, right? These aren't widely accepted words that people just accept. You get what I'm saying? They don't just accept that you're going to do this, but you're going to have to withstand it and start growing your skin 7 layers thick to make it through your own family, even to know that's where the trauma started, right? And that's okay, but you're not going to be part of it anymore. And often some people come back to you and like, I can't talk to my parents anymore. I can't talk to my brothers and sisters. And I say to them, it's okay not to talk to them, because you're not saying anything bad, right? When we're apart, there's no damage that's being done. If we're together and I'm going, oh, Vikram, you're this, and you're, oh, Jim, that could widen our gap, right? You establish, look at your want is to be talked to a certain way, treated a certain way, you'll reciprocate that. If people can't do that for your own salvation, I tell them, step away, right? Leave that with these folks. They will come around or they won't. That's it, right?
Because I'm saying this whole concept of, I'm using your terminology, indigenous dispute resolution. What we have to really look at in relation to numbers, because how do we look at it? Western world, as we would call it, or let's just look at Europe and the US and Canada, Australia, wherever. These places. What is the population we're talking about? Maybe about, I think, almost about 800 million in Europe, about 300 million in the US, 38 million in Canada. This is nothing compared to the larger population in the world. So what I'm saying is that the whole dispute resolution system, as let's call it indigenous dispute resolution, is something that can actually, some people can relate to. They can relate to that. And we're talking about almost 8 billion people on this planet. So there is, of course, lots that we have to connect them to, which they already have, which is the whole idea behind that symposium last year, mediation in our culture and traditions, indigenous peoples and mediation, and now connecting it to what was in a way destroyed in relation to dispute resolution, mediation specifically. So I think there are enough people on this planet who will connect to that. And I think that's the movement, Jim, that we have to be able to take forward, to be able to tell them,
One thing I suggest to people is do this in your own families, right? When something happens, your son knocks over a vase off your back thing. You hear the crash, you fear that it's your good vase, right? But so much damage can happen in that moment in time when you're addressing who broke your vase, right? You say, who did this? I'm going to kill you if you did this, type of thing, right? And whoever did it was able to say, I did it, but then they heard I'm going to do something bad. You were like, all right, well, I'm going to go away. And there's your controversy. There's your anger, right? What if we ask people just simply what happened, right? Not what did you do? What were you thinking? None of that. What happened? Without a tone, just a gentle tone. And to hear the story, because they might hear a different story going, look, I was just standing there, this bird flew in, hit me in the head, I fell over and I knocked it. You're like, oh my word, that's a crazy story. Thanks for telling me. Well, they're not to blame, are they? The story isn't what you thought it was. And we have to be able to do that on a regular basis with people. Because the minute you think I'm going to yell at you for something, or I think you're going to yell at me, we stop talking. We're done, right? We clam up, if you will. Be quiet, we have to recognize that. But how did that start? It started through the aggression. That's how it started. And we can cut out that aggression, and things happen every single day. They happen, right? And all we should be asking is what happened, right? What were you thinking at the time, right? What were you thought about since? All right, who's all affected by what was done here? You're like, well, mom's going to be really mad about that vase. I can see that, right? Yeah, you're right. What needs to be done to make things right? What you're doing is opening the door for the possibility of resolution. No one needs to hang. No one needs to walk the plank. We're good. We settled it, right? Because it's those controversies and those conflicts that drive other people to leave there and go out in the world and create bigger conflicts and bigger problems, right? It all starts with us, how we generate and how we do. And if we can quell conflict in our own homes within our own people, that is going to have a better result for everybody going out about. It'll just be better. If I'm not leaving my house mad, you're not leaving your house mad, and everything's settled back there, we're good. That's the spot we want to be. That is a good-minded spot right there. That you're settled with what's going on. You're okay.
Because Jim, the word that you used, aggression, is that something which has come from colonization?
We didn't have that, right? Like when we look back in our history and we hear the teachings, right? We didn't have jealousy, right? We didn't have anger in the sense of that you have and I don't, right? Because if you had back in the day, all I had to ask you is where you got it, and you would tell me. I could go get it. You might even come help me get it, right? And so there was no need ever to be like, there was never just enough of that. There's enough for everybody, and there still is enough for everybody. It's when we turn our minds and we think that it just belongs to us, and it gets narrow and narrow, and you don't deserve that. Those are colonial thoughts, right? Because we all deserve, always. So for someone to say anyone doesn't deserve, I know right away those are colonial thoughts. You put limits on it. You put all these things. And I'm not saying that there shouldn't be limits out in the world, but we do that in conflict and it makes it worse, right? We do that and that is the aggression. And it's those things that we know were born right in the basement of that mush hole, right? That's where they're born. They weren't, whoever brought them, they were born someplace else, but they brought them there. And that's where that came from. To this day, in our communities, we're split in a couple different ways, where residential school did a couple things. And I described to you about how the effects on my aunts and uncles and my kin, right? It was detrimental to them. It really was hard on them. But there's another section of that there's folks that went through residential school the whole time. They gained favor, right? Those folks were elevated to positions back in the community. They became welfare administrators, they become school teachers, they become people in the community that essentially replaced somebody called the Indian agent, right? So the Indian agent used to be an agent of the government, right? He would come in, decide how much you're going to get, if you can leave or not, everything he would decide, right? And as that started wearing, they start wearing in maybe in the 40s or 50s, they took him out and they put people that were indoctrinated inside those positions, right? And they said to those folks in elected council, they said, you better hang tight to it because these folks, traditional folks, want to get you, right? And that created that thing, right? I'm traditional, you're elected council folk. You just can't be nice to me. And if the other people will say, you don't be nice to him because he's just going to try to get you. And that's our environment, right? And it just keeps on going on and on and on until one day we really have to figure it out. And I say that the IDR process, the restorative process, will help set it so that we know how we're going to treat each other. There is no hiding behind anything. It all come out, right? And that's the place we want to live. We lived there before, in that place where we all knew, and if you had troubles, we only wanted to help you, and we would bring you to that good mind. Well, there's a big gap in there when that didn't happen, and now we have to get back to it. That's the only way to be, right?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about the decolonization also, is because divide and rule, 3 words, changed everything. That was the whole concept, and that has continued. I mean, it's not that that the colonizer might have left, but that continued. So I think that divide and rule, to be able to understand that aspect. The other thing that I can see is that whole concept of the community by itself, that concept also, because it's connected to divide and rule. You can't have communities together, otherwise obviously they'll get together, and how are you going to rule? So I think these things are connected. The other thing is, one, we of course were talking about intergenerational trauma. I think intergenerational thoughts that of course are affected by what you heard, and all those things like aggression. We just talk about aggression, this emotions and everything connected to that whole colonized mindset that was ingrained into people. I think those, to be able to get out of that, I mean, how that has to happen, that also is something we need to look at.
100% decolonization of all our communities, right? And it goes with taking away hierarchy, right? It goes into schools where we're not sitting a headmaster at the front and putting everybody in rows, right? We often ask kids this, going, where did this system come from, right? Where did the system of us sitting in rows, the head person up top talking to us, where did it come from? Because when you and I go back in our history, right, nobody was sitting in rows, right? We were sitting in a circle, right? And no one could tell where the start, middle, or end of that circle was. And that's how we did. That's how we, if I say gather around, I want to teach you something, right? You would gather around and take in what I said and ask questions in a safe way. But if I'm staying up front and I deliver my message, and you're in the back row and you're going, right? That's what happens. You don't feel a part of it anymore. So this idea of the Western approach, or the colonization approaches, goes into schools, it goes into courts, it goes into doesn't matter what environment you go into that's regulated, is regulated with an authority figure up top, with the notion that you're going to get in trouble if you don't fall in the line, right? And those rules, I'll say, are fine if you're dealing with the same kind of consistent kind of situation, right? It's always hard and people are difficult, right? I get it. Why you just is very, very hard, right? But not every situation is like that. And more often than not, they're not like that. And they need words to untangle them so that we can figure out what has happened. But more importantly, so it never happens again, right? More importantly, it's bad that you got in trouble. It is. No one wants to be in trouble. But let's take it upon ourselves to figure out what we can do so this never happens again for you, right? What do you need? Type of thing. And that aspect is missing from the colonial portfolio, if you will, right? There's no interest in making good again, or renewing, right? Colonization demands that you go up and down with it, right? It's kind of like if you had a friend and he goes, I don't feel well, I feel good, and you have to go up and down with it. Eventually you're going to go, listen, buddy, I'm going to feel the way I'm going to feel over there, and what can I do for you so you don't feel this way anymore, right? That's what colonization doesn't want, because in those moments in time when you recognize that you don't need to do that and do different, it takes away from the supremacy, right? Because there is no supremacy. And I'll go as far, I'll use the words of Dr. Bob Anton Cat, what he said about the IDR process. He goes, it is our process, it's the best process, and that's the process that we're going to use to the end of time, right? And those are his words, and I hang on to those because he realizes that if we don't start taking accountability amongst ourselves, and even when we make mistakes, we're doomed. We're doomed to the end. It won't be good, and I don't know what And he's right. We have conflict is killing us. So
yeah. So I think that's the idea behind those mediation circles, is the idea to bring this together. And I think that's where you're going to come in, that people who want to be part of that, you are going to take us through that process and talk about it. But you are being really polite by sticking on. I'm sure there is, I've taken much more time than you thought it would. But that's what happens, Jim, with me. That's why that series that I have in Conversation with the Beautiful Mind,
Yep.
I tell people, don't keep a time limit. We don't know how long it's going to go. Some of them have gone, I think it was at first one, the second one went on for 3 hours, 3.5 hours. So, but I'm sure you have lots to do. So if there is any concluding kind of thing that you want to say, please put that across. And
No,
then
I just want to thank you again for opening this forum up and giving voices and I appreciate the other presenters. I appreciate you, what you're saying. It gives you a sense that we're not alone here, right? What we're there's a collective thought that's going on, and if we can all make an effort to look at that past and figure out what has gone on from there and doing the work necessary and not holding it back for any shame, right? This is work that needs to be done, and this is work that is going to help and save people. So
absolutely. No, well said. I think that's the whole idea. So, Jim, thank you really much. I mean, there's a lot of time that you've taken, but it's a pleasure talking to you. It was a pleasure talking to you in the Indigenous Peoples and Mediation.
yeah,
And we have a lot of work to do when Indigenous dispute resolution becomes what we call mainstream. That's what we have to work on. So, thank you
for
very
sure.
much.